Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I totally subscribe to the notion that knowledge is power. When you have got knowledge, you have got the power to quantitatively and qualitatively improve your own life and that of those around you. The ancient Greeks, were right in saying democracy demands that the people should be educated, knowledgeable, and diligent. Diligent to hold those in positions of power to account. Otherwise, the notion of a government of the people, by the people, for the people is meaningless. If those people are not empowered to exercise in a meaningful way the power to hold, to govern, to elect competent men and women to run public affairs and to hold them to account, then that government is doomed to fail. Indeed, it is not a democratic government. When Zimbabwe gained its independence, ZANU-PF committed itself to education. And I think, and rightly so too, many people applauded the regime for that initiative. But what became quickly clear was that ZANU-PF was obsessed with quantity, even at the expense of quality. Take, for instance, a government-run school like Goromonzi or Fletcher High. Before independence, Fletcher High, for instance, had two streams of Form 1, two streams of Form 2, two streams of Form 3, two streams of Form 4, a lower 6 arts, a lower 6 science, an upper 6 science, and then upper 6 arts. That was it. But soon after independence, government, in its infantile wisdom, was giving directives to schools like that to increase their intake. Fletcher used to have almost 90% of his students were boarders. They were instructed that they must have day scholars too. And very slowly but surely, they increased their intake such that within a few years, they had 6 streams of Form 1, 6 streams of Form 2, and the numbers for Form 3 and 4 were being increased accordingly. The facilities were not improved. The number of teachers was not increased. And so it is not surprising that the quality suffered. There is only so much that even the best teacher can do. What we have seen happen in Zimbabwe is the quantity increasing by leaps and bounds, and the quality going down. In 2019, in Chirezi South, the MP for that constituency, called all the headmasters of the primary schools, secondary schools with Form 1 and 2, and secondary schools with Form 1 to Form 6, and so forth, to a meeting to discuss the results of that year. Turned out that the best performing government schools in that constituency had a pass rate of 3%. 3%. Those were the ones that would have performed very well. Of course, it's tragic. The reality is the quality had been completely sacrificed. 2-3 years ago, a senior member, a senior official in the Ministry of Education was quizzed by the Parliamentary Committee on Education on the standard of education in Zimbabwe. And he openly admitted that there are students, many students, doing Form 3 who could hardly read or write. I could subscribe, I could believe that. When I was working as an engineer, one year we decided that we were going to recruit some of the O-level students and A-level students for our junior workers. We asked specifically for somebody with O-level or A-level English and maths. And when we interviewed some of them would say they have got A grade pass in English at O-level. When you ask them what is a verb, they did not know. Another student had grades B or C in maths at A level. And when we asked him what is Pythagoras' theorem, they did not know. The quality of education in Zimbabwe has deteriorated to the point where it honestly has become a farce. Every year, our president keeps hundreds of thousands of graduates, and yet most of them, it appears, they really have not learned much. And the reason for it is actually very clear. Government, while it has been keen to increase the quantity, it has failed to improve on the funding of the schools, making sure that the facilities are fit for purpose, and pay the teachers, the educators, living wages to enable them to stay in the profession. They haven't done so. This is a video clip of a rural school in Zimbabwe. One has got to ask what kind of education are these children getting? No wonder at the end of their grade 7, you have a 0% pass rate. Form 2, the same thing. Form 4, the same thing. Each year, you find they've learned nothing. Instead of concentrating on let's teach them something, they're just pushed on. The politicians want to boast that they've got so many schools in my constituency, and we've got so many students. It is a great pity that we have shortchanged so many of our children out there. The competition now is to award higher and higher degrees. It is now quite common to hear of somebody saying they've got a master's in this, a doctorate in that. And a friend of mine went to Zimbabwe recently and was saying that he interviewed some students who had masters in some degree course they had done. And yet when he had asked them to fill in a form, they could hardly write. What is going on? This is tragic. These people have invested years of formal education, and yet they've learned nothing. The tragedy, of course, is that these people believe they've been empowered, they have knowledge, they've been empowered, they can make decisions, when in reality, they have had the 13 years of formal education, yet they learned nothing. And hence the reason why Zimbabweans have become targets for exploitation by particularly the unscrupulous politicians. It is easy to see why the ZANU-PF has managed to con millions of ordinary Zimbabweans out there into believing that Zimbabwe's economic meltdown is not caused by corruption or mismanagement, but by sanctions. When you are ignorant, naive, and gullible, you have no choice but to believe it. On the other extreme is the opposition. They too have found in the Zimbabwe electorate people they can easily con. Last year, there is no doubt that Nelson Chamisa conned millions of Zimbabweans, many of them with university qualifications, masters and doctorates, into believing that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. And they should therefore then participate in the flawed elections, confident that Triple C would win big. And yet, the day after the election, Chamisa himself was the first one to say the elections had been rigged. Why is it that Zimbabweans were easily conned? Why is it that these men and women with 13 years or more of formal education were so easily conned into believing an idiotic lie like Triple C will win rigged elections? But that is the danger. When you believe you've been empowered, you know, when in reality, you don't know. Robert Mugabe started this crazy about education, this belief that he himself had no fewer than 7 university degrees. But to be quite honest, he clearly did not know much. Because if he did, how is it possible that he could destroy the country so thoroughly if he was so knowledgeable? His successor has followed this line. The crazy about education is continued. We continue to churn out these university graduates, many of them with masters and doctorates. And yet, it is no more than, those degrees are no more than just wallpaper to decorate the office. There is really nothing in the head. It's an empty head. And they are readily and easily exploited by the unscrupulous politicians. Zimbabwe needs to stop this cycle of rigged elections. After 44 years of rigged elections, we need to end this cycle. And it is not as if it is rocket science. We need to understand what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections. We have had help from the European Union when they came to observe our elections. They gave a detailed report with recommendations what needs to be done to make sure elections are free, fair, and credible. The opposition in their greed have ignored those recommendations. And we, the electorate, in our ignorance and naivety, we have believed the opposition's lies, that the opposition can win rigged elections. 2028, I believe, is going to be a crucial year for Zimbabwe, because we have got once again a chance of stopping this case of rigged elections and bad governance. We are not going to stop ZANU-PF holding those elections. Right now, ZANU-PF has got all the political power. So of course, it's not going to reform itself out of office. So we can forget about implementing any meaningful reforms before those elections. The next point would be that the opposition should not participate in these flawed elections. But we know that the opposition will participate in these flawed elections out of greed. David Coulthard, in the quotation that is being shown on the screen there, admitted it himself. that the opposition should not be participating in these flawed elections, the only logical step is to withdraw. But they've not withdrawn out of greed. We failed to stop ZANU-PF holding flawed elections. We failed to stop the opposition from participating in flawed elections. What we can stop is this triple C, Chamisa Chete Chete brigade participating in flawed elections. The ordinary person has absolutely nothing to gain from participating in flawed elections. Why so many people are easily conned into believing an idiotic lie like I've plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes? Beggars belief. Yet we know it happened, and it is almost certain to happen again in 2028. The challenge before this nation is to make sure that that does not happen. I think one of the most fascinating things or tragic realities of our time is that we are now in the 21st century. Why people should be ignorant, naive, and gullible, beggars belief. And Zimbabweans in particular, we've often boasted of being the most literate nation in Africa. And yet we are the most ignorant, naive, and gullible people on this continent. Easily fooled. We believe we have an education system and have continued to participate in it, to support it. And yet, year after year, particularly in rural areas, it has only managed to produce a 3% pass rate at best. Even those who do not live in the rural areas, you have got to ask yourself, what kind of citizens will these ill-educated individuals make? Can we really have a healthy and functioning democracy in which so many people are given a useless piece of paper saying they've done 13 years of formal education or more, and yet we know they've learned absolutely nothing of substance? That is the question we must now face. Crowning somebody with a doctorate, an empty head, calling a doctor, will not make a better person. They will still remain an empty head, big-headed, and a curse to the nation. When you've got a lot of big-headed individuals in positions of power and authority, you know you are in serious trouble. We are in serious trouble. How anyone can continue to make a fuss of capping hundreds of thousands of university graduates every year, knowing fully well that most of those people can hardly read and write. It's tragic. And that such an individual should be dictating the destiny of the nation is unbelievable. And in this case, the same individuals, the same buffoons have been dictating the destiny of the country for the last 44 years. Little wonder Zimbabwe is a failed state. Thank you very much. Have a good night.